that intro, man. That is the best.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Chris, do you like my intro?
Yes, I love it. Oh my God.
Thank you for joining me. Hello to everyone in the chat. We've got an international audience. Ender Trading from Ireland. Hello. We've got the lovely Mrs. J, who is moderating the chat on my channel here. How is it going? And as she says, yes, give that like a tickle on the way in. It helps push the video out to more people. So thank you for joining us. We've got Jeff from Canada. There's a bunch of you guys here, so thank you for joining. And thank you for coming, Chris. It's great to have you back on my channel.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me, Alex. I really appreciate it.
I'm really excited to bring you on for this chat. We're going to be talking about the difference between the US and the UK approach to applying Scientology. Now, I want to make it really clear, Scientology is a totalitarian extremist belief system, right? It's applied correctly 100% of the time, like you cannot change policy. So there is no doubt you have to follow what L. Ron Hubbard wrote as it was written. However, there are ways of applying it slightly differently or, in different ways. And the more you and I talk, the more I realized there were some key differences in London specifically as to the rest of the world. And just to give everyone who, I'm sure everyone does know who you are, but if anyone's watching that doesn't know who you are, I think you're great for this topic specifically because you have the experience of working at international management over in the States, in the Sea Org, but also having left the Sea Org and Scientology, you now have a master's degree in the psychology of coercive control, right? So you understand the mechanisms and the way it works from an academic perspective as well, and you have the research and the knowledge beyond that. So I think you're definitely well qualified to talk on the subject. So thank you. Is that a fair summary of your?
Yeah, you nailed it, except for one thing. Let me clarify. I was at continental management, not international management, and I know people, some people's heads will explode over the difference in that. So I will definitely clarify. I was West U.S. management, but definitely rubbed shoulders with a lot of int staff all the damn time. So anyway, yeah, everything else you said, totally accurate.
Yeah. And before we delve into the main topic, I think we have to mention at least the current goings on here in the UK. All hell has broken loose. The mayor and East Grinstead Town Council are under fire. I must give it to them. The Church of Scientology maybe knew me better than I knew myself. When they declared me a potential trouble source, they weren't wrong.
Yeah. Yes, you are. Oh man, not even potential. You just are a trouble source. You're just TS now. Forget the P.
I'm a current trouble source.
Yeah,
CTS.
I was shocked to learn what happened today with this meeting minutes thing. What this just happened, right?
Yes, within the last hour. So I haven't actually talked about this on my channel yet. I put a tweet out, but long story short, there was a council meeting on the 8th of January that I attended where I posed a few questions to the mayor about Scientology, their involvement, and asked about safeguarding and what they do to protect people from abuse and that sort of thing. It was shrugged off and, there was a whole debacle about it. Now, there was another council meeting earlier this week on the 29th of January, and I think it was 6 or 7 people joined that meeting on Zoom to ask questions. 4 of them managed to do so. They were shut down completely. And they uploaded the video to YouTube yesterday, the official East Grinstead Town Council YouTube channel, and they cut out the questions section at the beginning and claimed that it was for the protection of those due to allegations and so on, which is in itself bad. But what's made it worse, in the last hour, East Grinstead Town Council have published the draft minutes of the meeting, which completely cut out all mention of Scientology and doesn't actually specify what the questions were, what the answers were. It just makes reference to, the general gist of what was being asked and shrugs it off completely, which is outrageous because it is censoring and adjusting the public record, which is, I'm not sure if it's a crime or not. I need to look into it, but it certainly is wrong in every way to alter the public record, the meeting minutes.
Absolutely, it is, especially to be removing and censoring "quote unquote" troublesome content that is not troublesome at all. Any of us know this is not. This is, we're not talking about defamatory, illegal statements, libelous, slanderous statements. These are experiential I experience blah. What are you guys doing about this? It seems to be the pattern of what's being said, and these guys are just cutting it right out of there, and that's the opposite of transparent, open, honest government. And that's, and I mean, I always wonder, here's, what I want to say right off is, I always wondered how dirty, East Grinstead was, because there was not really a lot of question that Scientology would have exerted its PR area control for decades now, just like they have been doing in Clearwater. But wow, that's pretty bad.
Yeah. It's the same for me. When I started delving into this, I knew that there were going to be, potential people who were in their pocket and so on. But I never in a million years thought it was going to go this far and this deep in terms of their attempts to censor and alter the public record to protect themselves and Scientology. Someone left a comment on the video I did yesterday, which I think sums it up. This is completely how I thought as well. It says, at the very beginning of this, I thought the council was just naive. Now I see they are corrupt. And that's exactly what I thought. I thought one or two might be naive, maybe some willful ignorance in there. But now it's very clear it's not just the mayor. It's not just the clerk. It is a number of them that are not just naive. They are actively corrupt, right? Clearly by their actions today. And I also want to make it really clear, it's not all of the council. Like, there are councillors there who are not happy with what's going on, who have, spoken up internally. I believe, I understand there's been conversations going on that indicate not all of the council are supportive of the mayor's actions and their response to this whole thing. But it is by far a majority of them, right, which is concerning.
Very concerning, because trying to get action taken requires a majority of the council. And, so that itself is troubling. Do we know, I had a question for you about this in terms of, well, I guess I'm just, the MP that you have, who has been demanding an investigation that Leah got on board with, you were pushing that forward. What is the relationship between her and the city and this town council? Because I don't understand necessarily the nuances of the differences between what we have and what you have.
Effectively none. So East Grinstead Town Council is the lowest level of administration in the UK. So they're just responsible for East Grinstead, the town. Above them is Mid Sussex District Council, who are a larger area. And then you have West Sussex County Council, who's over the whole county of Sussex, like a state in the US. And then you have the central main, UK government above them. So Mims Davies is the Member of Parliament responsible for a large portion of Mid Sussex, West Sussex, and she's the one that sits in Parliament representing East Grinstead and surrounding areas. Diane Abbott, who is my local MP, is the equivalent of Mims Davies, but in the different area, which is where I live. So my MP is speaking up on the matter because she is representing me as a constituent, even though she doesn't have jurisdiction or anything over East Grinstead, which is also great because it shows it's a national issue. It's not just this one local town in Sussex.
Right, exactly. I'm wondering, though, regarding the East Grinstead Council problem here now that's developing, whether the MP directly over East Grinstead might be somebody to contact or reach out to. I'm sure you already have, but get on board somehow. What do you know anything about that person? Or
well, Mims Davies, the MP, went to the IES event in November. She also nominated, East Grinstead Town Council nominated St. Hill, and Mims Davies gave them an award for their community efforts and how well they've helped with the response to the pandemic. So Mims Davies has definitely supported Scientology in the past, which is even more scandalous considering she's the Minister for Disabled People in the national government. And Scientology, as we know, is very anti-disability rights and thinks of disabled people as degraded beings. So it's even more scandalous that she, representing those people, has given an award to St. Hill. It's outrageous.
Oh, okay. So she was the one. Okay, got it. I wasn't. Yeah, Thank you for
Yeah.
clarifying her position in that connected to that story. It's hard to keep track of all the details. Okay, got it. So I just wanted to kind of understand what's happening there. So this is baby steps. We're moving forward, and you're stirring up the nest, and here comes the noise. It's kind of how I see it.
Exactly. And it's a process, right? East
Yeah.
Grinstead Town Council is the very starting point. You know, this is the next jurisdiction up is Mid Sussex District Council, who have all been involved as well in the trying the cover up and the squashing of the code of conduct complaint. This is slowly becoming a bigger and a bigger beast and a bigger problem. But it takes time, and we're chipping away at it and working hard at it. So we'll see what happens.
Excellent.
But let's move into the topic today. So I think a good starting point would be how we talk when we're in Scientology, how we would talk about Scientology to people in the public, right? So, for example, when I was in Div 6, which is the public-facing portion of Scientology, I was responsible for recruiting new people in. People would walk into the test center or into the org and be like, what's Scientology all about? I've heard things, right? And the way I would approach that question is, I think in London, we were very aware Scientology is known for being a bit culty and a bit weird. And, you know, there's the glazed over eye staring situation. And that's not to say it didn't happen, but I think we were quite aware of it in London. So we made proactive efforts not to come across as creepy and intense. And so we very much had a hands-off approach. So that we didn't come across as culty and weird and all of this. And I thought that was just, you know, the sensible thing to do that was done in all Scientology orgs. But that's not what your experience is, right? It's not how it's done in America. Do you want to explain your side of things?
Absolutely. From what we know and what I lived through and what I've talked with so many other people about from their experiences with it, on the public front-facing lines, you could say, you know, of Scientology, the where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, right out on the front sidewalks and streets and whatnot. Scientology has always had a sort of chameleon approach to the culture that it's in. It has to blend in with whatever the culture is and the times. And so in the 50s, you had Scientology, Dianetics and Scientology being presented very scientifically and very, you know, ideologically even, with the Cold War and radiation, and we're going to solve the nuclear problem and all, you know, all these things, trying to get into current hot topic. You know, what do people care about? What do they need help with? What are they worried and anxious about? Let's ride that, whatever that is. And in the 50s, obviously, Cold War stuff. 60s, you know, the counterculture and the rise and awareness of spiritualism and spirituality and free love and groovy, baby. And Scientology changed as a result of that. And it presented a more spiritual side, which persisted through the 70s, when it then got more into the sort of toolkit attitude of things. And the reason I'm mentioning all of this is because this is sort of Scientology internationally morphing itself to go with the times and try to present its, you know, itself to the most possible people in the best possible way. Now, that all being said, right, and so on with the 80s, 90s, and today. But also, you have tons and tons of individual variation from one place to the other, because cultures are different. The UK is very different, very much more polite, very much more mannered than the US in so many ways. This is not just a stereotype; it's actually true. And so the front facing are going to be a bit different. And we had, the last time that I saw any kind of successful bringing in the numbers kind of activity with book selling and testing and the front facing stuff was back in the 2000s, the early 2000s, I think it was, when they were doing this great big in your face book selling stress test thing. And they were doing this from what they learned in some European countries, actually Italy most specifically, and then in New York. And it was called the New York stress test pattern, and they exported this out to everybody. And they wanted everybody doing this. And it was not a backed off, oh, please, sir, would you like to check out our pamphlets? It was, Scientology, baby, you need this book right now, right? Dianetics going to change your life, right? Or pick up the cans and do the stress test thing if you can get them to check out the e-meter. So that's kind of in a general sense. That's kind of how it's rolled over the years. Is everybody's kind of different a little bit in terms of what they do or how they do it at their place, but they have to, or are encouraged to, or told to follow the patterns that are supposed to be most workable. And they tried in the 90s and 2000s to codify that, break it down step by step. Here's what you do. If you just do these things, you're going to have more people coming in, buying books, getting on service than ever before. You just got to do it. And then I saw what you guys were doing, and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because the stress testing is 100%. Like, we did that. That was the most successful book selling action for us. Like, we went out on the streets and did the stress test exactly as you are describing it. Find an area of stress in someone's life with the e-meter, and very hard sell, like reach and withdraw. You put the book in their lap and then you take it away and then you give it to them again and you say, this is the answer, basically. Get it, read it. 20 million people have, or whatever the number was, and this is, you need this book, this will solve your problem. And it was very hands-on in that approach. But when people came into the org, like a walk-in, or someone was just interested in taking a tour, or we body rooted them into the org and said, hey, would you like to come in and find out about Scientology, free personality test or something? The approach in that situation was very different. It was much more soft and, it was still find a ruin and sell them. But to get to that point, we took a lot longer because, we're a lot more conservative with a small c in the UK, and like you say, very polite and very like, but we're terribly sorry, if you please wouldn't mind, you kind of like, don't talk to me, I'm doing my own thing, mind your own business. So when someone walks in and they're just finding out what Scientology is all about, and they already know that we're a bit weird and creepy, we actively took a step back and said, well, look, this is the public information center. These are the display panels. Go and have a walk around, see what you think. And, this is one video. This is where I would start, which tells you the introduction to what Scientology is, and press play, and then just kind of let them do their own thing. And then once they've been there for a while, then start to engage in a conversation and then go in for the hard sell and find the ruin. But it was very soft in the beginning, which I don't think is how you guys do it in America. It's much more intense. Hey, we're Scientologists and we're going to change your life. Because if you did that here, people would just turn around and walk out.
Okay, and I'm curious now, because I'm thinking of hard sell, right? The policy from Hubbard about the correct attitude to have in selling Scientology. Hubbard literally has a section in a policy letter called copywriting. There's a section called hard sell. I probably should have had it today, but I didn't even think about bringing it up. But it says, I can remember a lot of it. It's pretty clear that it says in there, right, that, you insist that people buy. Hard sell means insistence that people buy. It means not, maundering or being in some weird doubt about your product. It's like, hey, man, you need this thing, and you need it right now. And the attitude is, there is nothing more important, right? Stocks, bonds, everything else is temporary and has no value compared to the eternity of Scientology and what it's going to offer you. Surely they showed you these references.
100%. And we did apply that. I think just, again, the way we applied it is different. If someone walks in, it was very much dependent on their attitude. If someone walks in and they go, hey, I've heard a lot about Scientology and that you're a cult and it's a bit strange and all of that, instantly we're like, I'm not going to hard sell right now, because that's just going to prove to you that we are a cult and we're weird and we're pushy and all of this. So instantly be like, okay, yeah, well, let me show you that you're wrong by letting you walk around on your own. And then once they've walked around for 2 minutes and realized that I'm not watching their every move, then they're kind of like, maybe what I've heard isn't quite true. And I would say that. I'd go up to them and go, see, how are you feeling? Do you feel like we're pressuring you or trying to hard sell you or anything like that? And they'd be like, no. I'm like, yeah. So maybe what you've heard about Scientology isn't 100% correct. They're like, yeah, well, yeah, I don't feel like that. So it's okay, great. But then you're in a conversation with them, then you find the ruin and hard sell. But that instant reaction, I think it's just very soft. And if someone was particularly standoffish and was like, I've heard you're a cult and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, cool. Sometimes we would let them walk around the information center. And if there was no interest, or like, you know, I could just sense that they weren't actually interested in, you know, buying anything or doing a personality test or whatever, I would just go, great, thank you guys, have a good day. You know, you're welcome back anytime, ask me any questions, and let them leave, because hard selling them is only going to result in black PR. It's not going to result in the sale. I could judge that quite early on, of like, is this worth my time and investment to try and change this person's life or not? And I kind of had quite a good sense of that. I think we generally did in Div 6 in London, at least.
Interesting. I'm thinking right now about the literalness with which Americans, and certainly certain Sea Org members, deal with L. Ron Hubbard's words and writings. And I'm thinking to myself right now that what you're talking about is sort of like thinking with the material.
Yeah.
Applying it, you know, contextually to the situation you find yourself in and dealing with the person in front of you, which I think a lot of people in Scientology, they're not so stupid when they get onto public lines or, you know, doing this kind of work, that they think, oh, no, you don't have to listen to people or something like that. But yet at the same time, you know,
Yeah.
there's something that occurs to me right now in terms of the differences, and let me maybe we should talk about the differences first, then we can get into why they're different.
Sure.
Because I might be going cart before the horse if I jump right into the literal Sea Org members, but I'm just sort of thinking that over many years that I was in Scientology and the Sea Org, I would hear about the UK. And we would have people come over to the US from the UK, sometimes Americans, sometimes Brits, and talk about what it was like over there, that kind of thing. And it was always this idea of a small operation that was kind of polite, not really intruding into people's lives very much. And, you know, the UK was just sort of this kind of plugging away, oh, those guys, those staunch, you know, Londoners or whatever. And that was about as far as I thought about it. I never thought about the UK as a place that was doing anything super effective to deal with Scientology or to get, sorry, not deal with, but to get Scientology out there. We never heard about stress tests, book sales, you know, new buildings opening, floods of new people coming in. Except unless there was an org opening, and that was always just, you know, after a while you kind of knew there was a lot of fluff connected with a lot of that, you know.
I was going to say, with the exception of, it probably would have been the year that you'd left, because that's the year I was on staff. And I remember when I joined, you know, book selling went through the roof, and we put London on the map. And, you know, David Miscavige sent a gold crew with Rachel Hastings to London to film what we were doing, because we were being so successful in selling books. And we won the birthday game just after I left. And that would have been 2014. So it would have been the year that you were leaving, that probably would have been the first time that London was known internationally for being effective at getting new people in. But we're still talking like, you know, 20 books a day, or no, I think we got to 100 books a day on average or something, which was like huge.
That's not bad. That's not bad. 20 books to make a Scientologist. So
yeah, exactly.
You know, it's the ratio. At least that's what they say.
Yeah.
The numbers in Scientology are pretty interesting, but they run high. You got to bring a lot of people in and sell a lot of books before you're even going to get a sign up for a service, which is what you're really going for there, right? Is you want somebody actually actively coming in. Well, that, you know, that being the case, like for another example of something that somebody told me one time in terms of differences between UK and US that gave me an impression as a Sea Org member that the UK was, you know, pretty chill place. In fact, enviably so on my part, okay, when I heard this story, is I was on the RPF and 25 books sold. Okay, good. Thank you, Lorna. I thought it was 20. Really? 25. Okay.
I thought it was 22, but it's been a while.
Totally fine to be corrected on that if I'm wrong on that. That actually only makes it worse.
Yeah, for them.
Yeah, for them. This guy came over who was RPF'd. He was this American guy, and he had been the commanding officer of the Commodore's Messenger Org, the highest, short of RTC, the highest organizational body in the UK would be the CMO. They're the guys who kind of coordinate and run management and take direction from RTC and issue and execute it into the churches. And they kind of make sure management's doing its job and all of that. So this guy was in charge of that whole operation, and had been sent over there, you know, many years before. And he told me in this very unguarded moment, when he was still very raw from having been RPF'd, like he had just arrived and was just getting involved and just kind of getting used to what was happening. It was days that he had been there. And he says to me, I didn't really appreciate how the farther away you get from international management, basically, he said, the slacker it gets, the less intense the environment tends to be. So when you're in California, when you're in the United States, you know, New York can be, I guess, relatively intense. They got a little management unit there. But you get over to LA, you start moving over in that direction, and especially once you get into California, and especially once you get down to LA, that tends to be the places where the churches of Scientology, city level, management level, Sea Org, these people are in it for blood. So they talk, you know. At musters, it's not yes sir, it's yes sir. You know, it's like, it's intense. And it's always that way. It's not like it, you know, it comes and goes in waves, but most of the time that's how it is. And management people can come down. They're a drive away. We didn't know where they were, but we knew they were close. And they'd come down, right? And so this CMO guy is telling me, yeah, I didn't really appreciate that. And he said, you know, we were getting lots of good stuff done and things were going fine, but it was a little too slow. You know, they weren't quite happy with us. And he got busted. You know, he got busted by RTC. So it was you know, an internal sort of observation, but it really kind of it changed the way I thought about things. Actually, it was quite interesting.
I think it's interesting to note two things. One, that even though it's a lot more relaxed in the UK, that doesn't stop things like abuse and forced hard manual labor, rice and beans, punishments, all of this stuff still happens, right? It is still a harmful, abusive thing here in the UK. It's just different in the way that it's applied here versus the US. And I think another thing to note also is that the way I'm talking about introducing new people in and being very soft approach and so on, that's at the beginning. Like, once I had been on staff for a while, and certainly towards the end, there was no holding back in applying ethics, and, you know, you have to follow everything by the T, you know, to the letter, exactly as it says. And it was very militant in that way. But I think they definitely ease into that. They're a lot softer than you would imagine. They don't go straight in with, like, you know, this is the answer to everything and you have to do it, and you're 5 minutes late from your first lesson, you know, course session on your first ever introductory service, so go straight to ethics because you're PTS. None of that. It was very much like, you have to be in it for several months and doing a few courses and getting to know the people and learn the tech and the way that it works before you're then expected to know how it's meant to be done, and then you're treated with that militant behavior. But it is definitely, like, ethics is a really good example of, like, you know, things that we got away with that we shouldn't have, and asking for forgiveness rather than permission. You know, I've spoken to a few people that worked over in the States and said that the UK had a bit of a reputation for kind of doing its own thing, and, you know, it's the UK, they're a bit different and I think that's an example of it. Is like, you know, we'll just do our own thing, and, you know, we wouldn't break policy, we wouldn't go off policy, we would just apply it in a different way, I think.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, Hubbard, you know, I mean, Hubbard sort of encouraged that in some ways, I suppose, but it was Did you have? Okay, let me ask you this. Let me ask you a more open-ended question. Was there much yelling at London.org?
Not really, no.
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean,
There is in the US.
yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to cast my mind back there. There were definitely tough conversations and strong words and a lot of swearing. Um, but there was never like a yelling. Even at muster, it was like, yes, sir, kind of enthusiastic, but just like I'm talking now, rather than yes, sir, like you described earlier.
Yeah.
Not really much shouting at all. Again, unless David Miscavige was nearby, when he was over the IES event.
Right.
And you can tell, you can feel it on the ground at St. Hill and around East Grinstead. When David Miscavige is in town, suddenly there are a bunch more people. There's a load of Americans that show up and are running security. And then suddenly everyone is on edge and they're much more like with the protests in November. It's like, shut this down, get rid of them. They need to be, gone.
Yep.
But when David Miscavige isn't there, it's like, oh yeah, just let them do their thing. They're not bothering us. Just leave them. As long as they don't come onto our property, whatever. Just let them do their thing.
Right. It's much more relaxed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Miscavige is kind of his psychosis is a little contagious.
Yeah. Well, we saw it in November, the protests. Janet Laveau, who's the COOSA UK, that's commanding officer of the Office of Special Affairs. So she's in charge of all the fair game, the dirty tricks, and the PR image, all that sort of stuff. I know this because the security guard told me, was that she was asked to leave the area by the security guard because she was getting irate. And the security guard told me it's because Dave Miscavige was on the phone to her while she was standing at the gate and yelling down the phone at her, like, you need to shut this protest down, get rid of them. So she was then, passing that anger on to the security guards, and they had to tell her to go and take a minute because there's nothing she could do. But that was a direct result of Miscavige and her being handled by him.
That's right. That's
to
right. And
handle up.
we know from earlier text messages and reporting from years ago with from Tony's blog, from Mike, from literally he released his text messages, right, that he was getting from Miscavige, and they were, you suck cock on Hollywood Boulevard, asshole. You better fucking handle this shit right the fuck now. I mean, can you imagine having somebody on the phone with you, talking to you like that at the top of their voice, and they're the leader of the church, the person who's the gatekeeper for your eternity? I mean, the pressure is intense to say the least, right?
And let's just contrast that to, I was going through recently some of the messages of when my mum wasn't a Scientologist and I was trying to not get her to be a Scientologist, but to get her to be okay with me joining the Sea Org. And there was this whole program of how to handle her, which I'll get into in a separate video. But I found these messages of like how, how do I deal with this? My mum thinks that Scientology is creepy and weird, and she came to the org and was a bit creeped out because everyone was like eye contact, and she said it just felt a bit uncomfortable. And the message that I got was this person said, it's not a good representation of Scientology. We're not perfect, and we don't always get it right. Like, that's the message I was getting from my seniors. Is like, we don't always get it right. Maybe we were wrong, which is completely opposite to you suck cock on Hollywood Boulevard, which is the American way of doing things, right?
Yeah, the David Miscavige way of doing things specifically, right? Because I'm American and I don't do things that way. But yeah, it's it very much is that and it has to do with the proximity to the power, right? To the source, to the high command. And in a big organization, in other words, one that's not just some commune style cult or some live in a house kind of cult. Like when you really kind of graduate up to buildings and organizations and the labyrinth that is Scientology, you have these layers of power, these steps that you climb. And Miscavige, being the micromanager that he is, moves up and down this ladder constantly and keeps everybody on edge constantly. And he thinks, in his stupidity, the real core of this thing is that he thinks in the middle, at the center of this, that's good management, that's how you're supposed to do it, right? All the various policies that Hubbard writes. can be interpreted that way and are, unless you're in the UK, right? Unless there's this cultural clash. And we see this in Australia as well. It's also been noted there. Maybe Canada, although I've never had anybody in Canada actually describe it to me the same way you have in the UK, and people who Australians describe it to me, in my shows of Australia, right? Where, Americans go to Australia, the Sea Org I'm talking about, within the Sea Org. You go to Australia, you go to the UK, yes, sir, rah! Right? And everybody else in the room is like, what's up, dude? Why are you doing that? That's not how it is here, but that's how it is in PAC, where I was from. It was, top of the voice kind of thing.
I remember Golden Age of Tech 2, all of these people had been over at Flag training for months and months, and they came back to London to then deliver these new services. And I remember there'd be a conversation with the ED, the executive director of London, talking to a couple of the auditors, and it was a staff meeting, and they were saying like, they've just come back from Flag, and she made reference to it being so militant over there, and it's all very like, hardcore to the T, wake up, study, go into session and then train and go back to bed and then up again in the morning. And she made reference to like having a bit of some air and a bit of a relief now that they're back in the UK, that it is not run quite so strictly as it is over at Flag. Like, people are aware of that. And I wonder how much geography plays a role in it, because it's physically not possible for Dave Miscavige to have such a day-to-day control over the operations in the UK, because it is so far away, whereas he can hop on a plane from Clearwater to LA and be in both cities in the same day and be very there and present. Not so easy with the UK. And I wonder if that just allowed the UK to get away with a bit more and get a little bit relaxed, because he simply can't control it. Do you think that comes into play much?
Absolutely. I think that's 100% why it happens that way. I'll bet you the most slack CLO is South Africa, because that's geographically farthest away, right, from base in Los Angeles, or Australia, right? Where are they, in Sydney or something? Absolutely. But what I'm sitting here thinking and remembering right now is you don't even actually have to be on the other side of the planet. You just have to be in a place where people aren't coming around very often. And Los Angeles, the Bay Area organizations, Flag, there's Sea Org in and out of there all the time. Tours and IAS and Ideal Org fundraisers and any other, Sea Org recruiters. There's constantly Sea Org traffic, you could say, going in and out of these buildings. So they never let them forget what they're part of. But I'm remembering now, even in Santa Barbara was not a hard sell organization. It actually was a lot like what you described with London. Yeah, we're going to be a little chiller in the front lines, that kind of thing. It wasn't a militant, drop everything. You got to sign up for Scientology right now or your life is over. We weren't really going in that way. There was more, I think it was a little bit more strident than what you described. But not as much, right? And so I'm thinking it has a lot to do with the repetitiveness or it visits from the Sea Org. I think it has something to do with that, is I guess what I'm saying, whether it's a mission or a tour or a recruiter,
But not just the Sea Org, because you've got to remember St. Hill is run entirely and exclusively by Sea Org members. And we had Sea Org at London, there were a couple of posts that were Sea Org. I think it's specifically international management or like LA or Clearwater Sea Org.
LA Sea Org.
One example that I was going to bring up was, we talked before about the social media campaign. When I was on staff, I was like, hey, look, why aren't we using social media to sell books? And came up with this whole plan and this idea. And that led to, the Instagram page and the YouTube videos that Charlie Wackley did. And, let's put London on the map. And, I've still got, I don't have it to hand, but I've got like the social media plan I developed of like, post a quote on this day from a book and then post a success story and so on. And when I came up with that idea, it was very much like, well, look, let's just do it. and make sure it works, because it's better to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. If we go up lines and ask int, like if we ask the CLO, it will go up to int, and OSA will come back and down lines and say, no, don't do it. So let's just do it, make sure we sell some books from it, and then it's a successful book selling action. So they can't tell us to stop, because that's a suppressive act. So just do it, but make sure it bloody works, because if it doesn't work, then we're all in big trouble. And I just don't see that flying at even Santa Barbara, which is much more laid back, but because it's so close to everything else, they just wouldn't get away with that sort of thing. Or am I misinterpreting it?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I was thinking to myself just now that I would have been scared to start a YouTube channel and get all that going, because, you know, we'll get in trouble. And the fear of that trouble would have been enough to not take the initiative, right? Even though I really would have wanted to. I took the initiative on a lot of things when I was in Santa Barbara, created my own, you know, our own org mag, you know, the magazine that was supposed to go out every month. We weren't getting that. It was supposed to be handled centrally. They weren't handling it. So we, you know, so we took that on, and I tried to do some other things in the years that I was there in Santa Barbara to get things going on the public lines. And I wasn't even a public staff member. I wasn't the guy getting new people in. I was up in the course room, you know, supervising classes. Or running the tech area, but there was just so few people in, and it was like, well, Jesus, you know, we got to do something about this. So we would do that kind of thing and issue it. And that was about as far out as I went, was issuing org mags without issue authority or central okay. Because we got to get the mag out, because it's policy. We're supposed to be sending out an org magazine. So that was kind of me doing a similar thing, you know, Santa Barbara wise, to what you guys were doing, as far as, well, we don't have any orders or directions on this, but I don't have anything that says I can't. So I guess I will. Let's see what happens. They put the kibosh on it within 2 months, right? They came down and were like, you can't send this out. This is because it wasn't high enough quality. See, it was more like an org newsletter. This is back in the 90s, right? This is all pre-internet and stuff, right? So I was just, you know, this is very primitive graphic software to put these newsletters together. Anyway, I guess I'm just kind of relating it to what you were experiencing there, in that we did try, there were efforts, but we got the kibosh put on it. We were ordered, don't do that. Just like when I went to San Diego and got 20 auditors in 3 weeks, you know, don't do that. It was like, what are you talking about? This is exactly what we're supposed to be doing. Nope, not that way. You're doing it wrong, you know? And it was like,
yeah, I think if you look at like ethics as an example, you know, when there used to be these things called bookathons, right? So every year there's this birthday game where all of the orgs around the world compete to try and, you know, expand and succeed and have all their stats up and everything. And one of the things that happens is a bookathon every, you know, couple of months. There was one week where all of the orgs get together and try to sell the most number of books. And it's kind of like an all hands. Let's get everyone we possibly can out to get, you know, London to beat all of the other orgs in selling the most books that week. And whenever there was a bookathon, obviously you'll get like 20 people coming out and selling books, and there'll be booths, stress test booths operating on 3 or 4 different sites across London that I was running. Whereas a normal week, it would just be me and 3 or 4 others, and that would be it on one location. So obviously we're going to sell loads of books, the stats are going to go way up, but then the next week, because the bookathon's over, people aren't going to drop everything and try and help book selling, because they've got their normal lives to go about and doing their normal jobs. So the stats inevitably crash the following week. But in Scientology, as per ethics, you have to apply conditions and formulas based on what your graph is doing. So when the stat crashes, you know, you're in trouble ethics wise, because your stat has gone down, and not just a little bit, it's crashed. So by the book, you know, I should have gotten major trouble for that every time there was a bookathon, but I never did, because there was an understanding that, well, yeah, of course that's going to happen, and it's because of the bookathon. So, you know, don't worry about it. It's not a stress, because, you know, we did something that is going to produce that result. So we're not going to come in and give you harsh ethics penalties because your stats, like, whatever, it's fine. Was that mentality ever repeated over in the States at all? I know you weren't in Div 6 on book selling lines, but were there any ever occasions where you do something, your stats crash, and you should buy the book, do one thing, but your seniors kind of just go, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal, you know, move on? Or was it much more?
Oh no. No one ever said the words to me, don't worry about it, it's
Don't worry
not a
about
big deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that was never said. The sort of silent, tacit agreement that we understand what's going on and we're just not going to talk about it, maybe. And let's just do the best we can to do the best we can kind of thing would be more the attitude about it that I remember. Yeah, no, I mean, and not unless you got somebody drunk was a staff member going to start talking like that, you know? Yeah, no. No.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
And the more I speak to people, the more I realize we did just do our own thing in London. And
Yeah.
I think we kind of knew that a little bit, but I don't understand. Like, if any other territory, especially in the US, if Dave Miscavige got wind that they were doing something slightly wrong or different or whatever, not how he wanted it to be done, he would come down and rule with the, you know, the iron fist. You know, the hammer would come down and, no, you need to fix your shit and sort it out. I just wonder why he hasn't done that with the UK. I'm sure it has happened on occasion, but like, when the UK has a reputation for doing their own thing and, you know, being very relaxed, why do you think Miscavige hasn't come over and spent considerable time here at St. Hill, getting it to the place where they all are all fearing for their lives and, you know, running it as he wants to? Is it just a geography thing, do you think? But
well, I think it has to do with his perception of return on investment.
Like, why does he think it's okay to let the UK get away with it, but not, you know, Tampa or whatever?
Well, I don't know that he thinks it's okay to get away with it. I think it's more a matter of, well, there's only so many bricks he's going to be able to put his attention on in a day in terms of, you know, laying bricks or whatever, right? I use that analogy. I mean, the UK is out of sight, out of mind all the time, just like Anzo is, right?
Maybe not anymore, Chris.
I know. And that's your fault. Not the orgs over there, right? I mean, you've been to Manchester. You've seen these places. These are, you know, 3-4 staff member operations. And it's been that way for decades. Scientology's never been big in the UK, not since Hubbard was around. So, you know, so it's kind of more of a, well, why would I go over there and do that? Is Miscavige's probable attitude. When he did do that in Clearwater and Florida in the late 90s, he spent a couple years at Flag following the whole Lisa McPherson thing. He was there resorting out and reorganizing and getting time motion studies done, and all kinds of stuff was being done at Flag. 1996 through 1998 or 99 or so, and we kept hearing about it. And then stuff happened out in LA, and a mission was sent to LA in 1996 to kick ass and take names, right? That whole PAC ethics mission. So attention gets put on PAC and attention gets put on Clearwater, because those are the two places where all the money comes from in Scientology. Classically, always. That's where it comes from. The UK, not so much. He would be much more interested in roto-rootering Europe, the European Sea Org base and the Europe orgs, before he would the UK, I think. Because it used to be, at least back in the 90s and 2000s, early 2000s, that it was the West US and EU, the Europe orgs, and they were the big moneymaker contenders for management attention and birthday game and all of that kind of stuff, you know. Also, the other solution, and since it segues into this answer well, I'll throw it in here, is the other thing that Hubbard acknowledged this problem. In his own writings, Hubbard said the UK, yeah, these guys, these
middle class PTS, right?
That's right. Hubbard said, he actually wrote a reference. It's a very short one. It's not really very long, but he says specifically that the CLO, the Continental Liaison Office, the senior management organization of Scientology in the United Kingdom, which is at St. Hill, that organization, and therefore the entire operation of the UK, by Hubbard policy is mandated to be run by a brash American. That's the exact quote, brash American. That's who's supposed to be in charge of the CLO, because otherwise the goddamn polite UK motherfuckers will soft sell Scientology. Now, this is, of course, how David Miscavige would talk about it. Hubbard didn't write that, but he did write, you gotta put a brash American in charge of the CLO or they just won't get anything done. History tells us this, right? It was this kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think it's important to note as well that this kind of getting away with it a bit more relaxed is still within the context of an extremist totalitarian belief system that controls people's lives and punishes them. You know, Mike Rinder tells of being thrown in the lake at St. Hill during winter as a punishment. You know, these things do still go on. It's just not perhaps as prolific UK wide. And it's definitely linked to when missions came over or when David Miscavige is around, it definitely intensifies. But, you know, when I went to visit St. Hill when I was a staff member at London, I would see the Commodore's messages in their full, you know, fake Space Navy uniforms literally running around. And as a teenager, I was like, wow, I want to be one of those guys. Why are they running everywhere? And it's like, well, because they're on such an important mission, they don't have time to walk. They have to run everywhere. And that's an indicator of note. They still do have to live by very strict standards, and they are being beaten and such to, you know, get this done properly and per policy at St. Hill. But when it comes down to the city level orgs, I think it's just, you know, yeah, cool, just don't break the rules. But, you know, as long as your stats are up, who kind of really cares? I think it's a very different story at St. Hill specifically. Because it's a SEAL base.
That's right. And it has a lot to do with who's in charge, right? I mean, the tone of the whole operation is set by the guy at the top. And again, you know, the UK is kind of geographically and communication wise and everything pretty remote. Other than the IS event every year, UK isn't really even on the map for Scientology in terms of statistics, income, or, you know, significant events, I guess we could say, or even significant celebrities.
Yeah. Well, it will be interesting to see how that changes over the coming months as David Miscavige starts to inevitably put more of his attention on the UK, because there is now, you know, a member of parliament calling for an investigation into their finances, citing their history of fraudulent activity internationally. You know, it's starting to turn into a problem of significance for David Miscavige, and it'll be interesting to see how their approach to the whole situation changes as, you know, this activism work continues and increases, right?
It will. That very much so. That's the kind of pressure that Miscavige is going to care about, and it's going to cost him too. Right? It's going to be expensive to deal with it. Excuse me, you start dealing with government level investigations or high level court cases like Leah's case, and you're talking about a lot of money. Excuse me. So those are the things I think that are gonna pester him. So do please continue doing what you're doing, because it's what we want.
Yeah. I will, for sure. And it's been really exciting and interesting. But I think, like, Fair Game is another example, you know, because they lost the Bonnie Woods case 20 years ago or whatever it was, where, you know, so Bonnie Woods spoke out and she was here in the UK and they're following her and harassing her, and, you know, they lost the case because, you know, she sued them, or I can't remember if she sued them or they sued her, but regardless, there was a settlement. They had to apologize, and they were effectively you know, found out and found guilty of harassing Bonnie Woods. So they've always taken a little bit more since then, a bit more of a reserved approach to the harassment and fair game and such, because they've already been told off. And I don't think that, you know, they would get away with it again, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And they have done stuff in the past. I think they're just a lot more reluctant to go full board, you know, following people around and physically noisy investigation getting in people's way. But I'm sure that will change the moment Dave Miscavige says, no, you need to go full fair game. At that point, they will do it. But I think that threshold is a lot higher now, because of the work of what other people have done. Whereas if Dave Miscavige was here, I'm sure they would have kind of been a bit more intense with it forever the whole time.
Yeah, it would be a more direct in your face sort of thing. I mean, right now it's just saber rattling, and we got to be clear that that's what's going on. And we need to push this forward through a great deal of public pressure in the UK, I'm talking about, so that it's more than just that, right? Politicians saying things is good. Actual inquiries and committees and things like that is what we need to see. And it's all in the direction of, at least as far as from my point of view goes, the effectiveness of that is not that a government official took notice or is saying things or that's in the media. That's all a byproduct. What we want, the goal, the product there, at least as far as I'm concerned, is a change in public policy. And that's something only the government can do.
Yeah.
We can't go to some citizens group. We can't go to YouTube. We can't go to social media and change public policy. The government has to do that. That's why it's so effective when we get, when you get them interested in this, right? And pushing that forward. So we have just begun this thing, and I hope you're getting a lot of support from locals, because that's the kind of support you're going to need to push this thing along.
Well, this is where it's difficult, when you do try and affect change and say to East Grinstead Town Council, we're not asking you to pass judgment or decide on what we're saying is right or wrong or whatever. We're just saying you should have some policy that says we should not go to events or accept hospitality or engage with controversial organizations, of which Scientology would fall into that category. Something like that is a very easy fix, but they're so unwilling to do it because they're so in their pockets. And the local residents, I spoke to a lot of local residents that have agreed. Thank you for giving us a voice. We all agree and trying, but we can't speak out because we're scared, right? They're our neighbors, right? We don't want the hassle. And I've been told on multiple occasions, thank you for speaking up on our behalf, because we're scared. We're not able to. And you're giving us a voice. And so I think a lot of residents are being quiet, but that doesn't mean they're not watching and supporting. They just don't want to put their name on it because, understandably so, they're frightened of the repercussions. And it takes people like Danielle Chamberlain and, Austin Waite and myself and Abby and my mum and everyone else who spoke at these, council meetings, who aren't afraid to put their name on it and say, yeah, come after me. I don't care. This is important. It takes those people to give a voice to the people who are too scared, and to show them, look, let's hopefully get this to the place where the locals are not afraid to speak out about their concerns, because they won't face reprisals because they're focusing on people like me instead.
Exactly. Well, strength in numbers for sure, for sure. And that's all I hope I'm encouraging here in this. Because that's how it's gonna happen, right? It's choosing your lane and going for it, right? I mean, government inquiry, news media, law enforcement, social media, education. All of these are lanes that various of us are on. And, and government inquiry and news media is something you are pushing hard, and it's working. So please keep going.
Thank you. Well, Chris, look, we're approaching an hour. Should we do some of these questions that I've been starring?
Guys, let's talk about some of these things.
Yeah. As we start moving through these, please put your questions in the live comments, and we'll start some more as we go through them. Debbie M here says, how lovely to have the good fortune of getting online when you two are doing a live stream together. Mad respect, you gentlemen, and are doing great work. Well, thank you, Debbie M.
Thank you, Debbie. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Fuik you, great name. COS is all about auditing and using it against you. It's about time the world audited them.
Fair enough. Go for it.
I saw some promo on an internal Scientology group the other day that said, let's put the world in session.
Oh, I know. Oh, I know. I remember those old promo with the picture of the planet and a couple cans, and you're just like, Hey, let's be clear about something. Let me say this, because this is important. At least as far as I'm concerned, from my perspective of education and all that, my lane, Scientology auditing is the awful core of what makes Scientology so awful. Everything else around that goes on around Scientology from the test centers to the testing to the signups to the rapacious, let's get your money. All of that stuff pales in comparison to what happens to individuals who submit themselves for Scientology auditing. That process, and the process of indoctrination and the process of doing the auditing process on people, no matter what kind of auditing we're talking about, and there's a lot of different kinds, all of it is not just bad for you, it's destructive to your mental health, like short and long term.
Yeah, I think what will be interesting, and this is in my head, the kind of battle plan of how I can see it evolving and why it's so interesting, because no one wants to rule on a religious belief, and there's separation of church and state and all this sort of stuff. So it's hard for a belief system to be assessed and all of this. But I think the way to get it done is like, people are being abused, right? At St. Hill, people are being thrown in the lake as punishment, as an example. That's wrong. That's bad. That shouldn't be done. So, people investigate that, they look into it, and let's say they find Scientology guilty of doing that, and they go, you have to stop it. That's where it gets interesting, because the next question is, well, why are they being treated like that? Well, that's because the policy says to do this, and you cannot change the policy. So therefore, you start looking at the policy, and then you start looking at things like auditing. And it's like, well, actually, that in itself is harmful and damaging, but you have to start somewhere. And I think a starting point is how they're treating people. But ultimately, I believe that the same as you, that Scientology is harmful. The practice of Scientology is harmful in and of itself. But I think the first point of focus that I'm trying to work on is saying, look, you can believe in Scientology, I don't care, whatever, like, that's your choice. What I have a problem with is the abuse of people and how they're being treated. And that's the starting point of these easy for people to understand who don't understand coercive control and the way auditing works. Easy to understand. Child taken from one country to another to work 18 hours a day, irrespective of your religious belief. That's wrong. And that's a starting point to introduce the idea of how that coercion comes into play, as to why the child may have said yes to doing that without understanding the repercussions or consequences. Does that make sense?
No, it totally does. No, it totally does. I just want to be clear about one thing, which is it has nothing to do with beliefs, although I definitely understand the hurdle because people think it does. Yes. That's kind of one of the problems of this whole thing that is so grossly misunderstood about Scientology. Is it's a belief system, and people just believe things, and oh, Xenu, it's so weird. That's not why Scientology is destructive. Has nothing to do with it. It's destructive because of the way and methods and actual what they do to you. That's what's so destructive, and it results in all the all the consequential stuff, the child abuse, the labor trafficking, the even sex trafficking, all the crap that goes on, all springs from that abusive process that they get to hide behind the First Amendment. They get to hide behind religious cloaking, but it's not religion, it's not belief, it's abuse. And that's a case that can't, I've made, that others made, and eventually, hopefully, I hope, will be made legally speaking. Wallersheim made that argument, made a lot of money making that argument.
Yeah,
actually, right?
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, Scientology just about ruined his life in the process back in the 80s and 90s. So it's anyway, it's a point I feel I have to make.
Yeah, no, it's important, and I get that, and it's important to kind of differentiate between those two things, and that's what a lot of people, I think, have trouble understanding, because they don't understand what Scientology is. They just give it the benefit of the doubt as being religion because they haven't studied it, and they don't understand the difference between belief system and harmful movement, right?
That's right.
JRN here. Question, Alex, has anyone from the US contacted you about advice on what they need to do to challenge some of the government in their own area here in the States? I think you'd probably be a better one to answer this. In the UK, if you want to challenge what Scientology are doing and bring it up and, do your part, you can write to your local MP. You can sign the petition at change.org/Scientology. You can promote these videos and talk on socials and so on, which, while we're on that topic, everyone press like, please, and share this and comment and subscribe if you're not already. and buy us coffee. If you want to support the channel financially, you can buy us coffee, and there's Amazon wish lists and so on both mine and Chris's channel. So that's the way you can support the channel. But if you're in the US, what can someone do, Chris, to, further the call for investigation or for politicians to start looking at this?
Well, they can do exactly what you're doing, which is attending their city council or county, councils, or contact their local or state representatives and visit them. I mean, go see them, get an appointment, or write an email or a letter and let them know that you are concerned in the exact same way Alex has been letting the East Grinstead City Council know. That's a action item you can go do all on your own. You don't need anybody else to go do that. If you can get other people on board with doing something like that, that's a good idea. Because social media as a body or as a medium is really best at raising awareness and at educating people about stuff. But going out and doing stuff is the going out with your feet, to the city council meetings, to your state reps. Also contacting law enforcement if you have actual knowledge of a crime, all right, that you can back up, then that's a worthwhile activity to do. You don't call the police or the FBI or something if you just want to rant at them. That's just a waste of their time and yours. But if you have actual information or testimony or evidence to give them, please do so. Any outlet of the FBI, for example, could be contacted. There are ongoing investigations. I don't know if I should say where, just that there have been for quite some time, by the FBI and by various law enforcement agencies into Scientology. If you're in LA County, for example, you contact the DA's office directly. New York, California, Florida, whatever, you have FBI offices. So those kind of actions could be taken, as well as, again, your Congress people, your state Congress, your federal and federal level. And then, of course, all the things Alex just said, petitions and online activation and that kind of thing is also very, very important. It's not like there's a lot of people doing this. And that might be something to mention here, right? Is there's a handful of us who work on this at all. So anything you do really would be helpful at this point.
Yeah, just raising awareness, like that's the main thing, right?
Right.
The Elk of Antioch, dissent from this interbulation, join the fight against xenophobia, report to Farsec today. That is just full of so many Scientology's jokes that a lot of people won't understand, but that's actually hilarious to a former Scientologist. Great comment. Yes. D. Thompson, thank you so much for this comment. Alex, I'm certain that so many, including myself, have incredible admiration for your dedication and compassion, truly inspiring. Well, thank you for that. But I also really want to make it clear that, yeah, I do in many ways feel like I'm going at it alone and I'm the only one and all of this, but it's just not true. There are so many other people supporting me on this mission. It's a group effort. Danielle Chamberlain, prime example, she bared all at the council meeting and told her personal horrific story of how she was treated in the Sea Org at St. Hill. And other people as well. I'm very much spearheading it in terms of coming up with the plan and ideas and this sort of thing. But it's a team effort. Like there are so many people doing this alongside me that I wouldn't be able to do this without. Right. Thank you, Dee, for your comment. But I think it is really worth saying that it's not just me. These other people also, Chris included, need respect and that admiration just as much as I do. Boy King, do you have any support from East Grinstead councillors, Alex? Yes, and this is one thing I really, really want to hammer home. It's not all of East Grinstead town council. It's the majority, but there definitely are councillors who are not happy with what's going on and do not support it. It's not the whole council, but it's the majority of them. Marina White, is the East Grinstead org tax exempt? That is a whole nother topic. Yes and no. They're not charity. They're not a charity in the UK. They're not tax exempt here. However, their buildings, part of their buildings are designated places of public worship. So they are exempt from paying business rates, which is a tax on the property that is used for religious services, like, you know, Sunday service, for example, that only businesses pay. So they're exempt from paying that particular tax in like the chapels, for example. But the offices and the Great Hall and these other areas that are like when they're not being used for Sunday service, they are taxable. And they certainly do have to pay income tax and corporation tax and all that other stuff. So complicated answer. Yes and no, but mostly no is the answer. Data law. It's interesting working near St. Hill. I talk to locals and most people think it's a strange place, but don't know what is going on behind closed doors. And that's exactly it, right? Is we need these people to understand what's really going on behind those closed doors, you know, hearing these stories. Chris, what are your thoughts on getting locals to become aware of what's really happening at St. Hill beyond, you know, sharing stories and videos and stuff? Like, how do you think we can really hit that message home to people in East Grinstead?
Well, it's just social media campaign. I mean, it's kind of like beyond this. I don't know. I mean, other than forming literally a group or something to, you know, East Grinsteaders against Scientology or something. I mean, you need something like that to organize people in an effective manner. That would be something useful. It's a constant thing because Scientology is not really front and center in anybody's life except ours.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is a constant thing to bring this awareness and let people know. I know John Atack had something he was doing at one point with protesters where he had a flyer or an info sheet he would give out to people that they could disseminate and get around into. I was thinking that would be something to not just hand out, but maybe you could get it out to stores and things like that in the area as well. You know, bulletin boards.
I would love to do that. I did have the idea a while ago of doing, like, you can pay distribution companies to like drop a flyer or a leaflet through every house in a town or an area. And I was looking into it. It's not that expensive to pay for a leaflet or a flyer to be posted through every single house in East Grinstead. I thought that if I can raise enough money, that would be quite interesting to do a little one pager that says, hey, did you know that this is going on? And this is how it's happening with the East Grinstead Council. And if you want more information, go to this website. And if you know someone that needs help, head to the Aftermath Foundation or, you know, YouTube. There's a community of us here to support you if you choose to leave. So that's an idea, but it costs money. So, you know, maybe one day we'll get there.
Exactly. Most of the effective stuff does.
Yeah, precisely. And you got to remember, we're fighting a, you know, $3 to $6 billion, you know, it's definitely David versus Goliath kind of situation.
That's right. But that is the kind of, you know, that pamphlet distribution is not a bad idea. That's the kind of crap that OSA would do against their targets, you know.
And they have done before.
Yeah, exactly. So getting some truth out there was probably a good idea.
The truth rundown.
There you go.
Question perhaps more for you here. Red Pill 3000. This is the last one I've got to start. How much does it cost to learn about the Xenu?
A few $100,000 to get there, to get up to OT3. I think it's going to be, I mean, we've had various numbers and I think they change over the years or whatever, but I think it's minimum to get to Xenu. It would be, I think, a minimum $150,000, $200,000. Pretty sure. Right. If you kind of kept things streamlined and didn't like give a lot of excess money to the church, I think it would come out to something like that. It's expensive.
Yeah. All righty, Chris, thank you so much for joining me. Is there anything else that you want to mention or cover before we wrap up here?
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me on. This is fun. I always enjoy talking about this stuff. No, I don't really have anything else to say, I guess.
How about a little comment? I'm going to play a very quick video to you before we go. Okay. I found this clip of Tommy Davis the other day that perfectly encapsulates my response to East Grinstead Town Council trying to censor you know, the public questions. It's only a second long.
That's it.
This is how I felt yesterday.
Well, buddy, you got it. Right here, right now. I'm angry. Real angry.
Wow.
I'm angry. Real angry.
Tommy. Dial it down, Holmes. Dial it down, son. It's okay.
Exactly.
Ah.
Look, Chris, thank you so much for joining me. Everyone watching this, thank you for joining us and engaging in the comments and all that sort of stuff. As we said earlier, like, comment, share, subscribe, all that stuff. It helps us get the message out to more people. You know, if you want to support financially, there's PayPal, buy us coffee, there's Amazon wishlist, all of that stuff in the description down below. And buy Chris's book. Chris has a book. Plug your book, Chris. Tell us about your book.
I have this book right here. This book is all about Scientology. This is not a book about me. This is a book about Scientology. And I wrote it to educate the public about it and break it all down for you. So you can definitely check that out. And it's on Amazon. You can get an audiobook, ebook, or printed copy. And hell, I even have a couple copies here. If you want to contact me, I'll sign one and send it to you. It'll cost you a little bit more, but I'll do it. And of course, you can always contact me as well for personal consultation. I do that. I work one-on-one with people. That's kind of my jam. That's what I do. I want to say that there has been some really interesting comments thrown my way recently about, you know, other activities that are going on in Scientology, like protests and things. And like I said in the show here, we all have our lanes, and it's very, very interesting. Some of the stuff that comes my way, I would encourage anybody who has real issues with me to go check out my channel and what I've said, because it seems that people have very odd ideas about who I am and what I'm trying to do. And it's all on my channel. So if you have questions for me, they're there, the answers for you. So I'll just say that much as well.
There we go. All right, Chris, thank you so much. And one final message to East Grinstead Town Council, and that is, I'm on war footing and I'm not fucking about.
Hip, hip, cheerio! Scientology's got to go! Hip, hip, cheerio! Scientology's got to go! The abuse has to stop! The abuse has to stop!
There is human trafficking occurring at St. Hill at this very moment, and it will continue until government agencies step in to stop it.